Hey folks, I'm Alex Melifib. I'm the co-founder of Sensor Tower, as you can see on this next slide. And today I want to talk to you about kind of the state of the mobile ecosystem and what's going on as far as search in mobile and what you can do to make your apps get more downloads. So when we think about mobile, the leading folks there, people like Google, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, they're very good as far as technology goes. But when we think about how search on mobile is, it's kind of like 1997 before. It's like Ask Jeeves or Alta Vista. Discovery in the App Store is a little bit bad. And it is a big problem. A lot of the times, apps don't get found. There are millions of apps in the App Store. And the alternative to acquire folks with advertising doesn't always work. So App Store optimization is kind of a solution for this. Like, what is App Store optimization? It's kind of the process for improving the characteristics of your app so it gets found in the App Store. And there are a couple of sliders you can kind of tweak and change, and those things are things like the keywords, the title, the screenshots, the videos, the description, and the localization. And it's, those are things you as a person in charge of the app have control over, and it's easy to go ahead and change that. Now, we can kind of think of two different life cycles of an app. One app on the left, as we can see, is an app that had a big launch and it kind of tapers down and dies down. And that's not the life cycle you want your app to have, because you're going to decline the amount of daily users you're going to have, and the new users incoming is going to keep going down. Another example on the right is an app that has a very steady baseline of downloads that's coming in, and that's kind of what you want your life cycle of your app to look like. You want to be growing over time. And App Store optimization kind of can serve as that base of downloads that you're getting day over day over day. Now, there are a couple of aspects to App Store optimization. One thing that you can do is you can tweak these things, and you want to optimize things like your keyword, your titles, and your localization. We're going to dive into this a little bit later. But you can't just sit in a vacuum. You have to look at your competition. You have to see what other folks there are doing. And not only do you want to look at your competition, but you want to see how your users are responding to this, both by seeing how the changes you're making are affecting things and kind of looking at the data at the end of the day and seeing, are your downloads going up, are your downloads going down, doing analysis on that and comparing yourself to the rest of the marketplace. And why should you care about ASO? Like, what kind of impact can this make? Well, for a typical app, 63% of their downloads are going to come through search. And in fact, even the head of Google search said, for an average app, the majority of the downloads are coming through search. And kind of why is that? Well, if you think about it, a typical app, unless you're being featured by Apple or Google, or you're running a very big ad campaign, where are those majority of users going to come from? Well, they're going to pull out their phone, they're going to search for your app in the App Store, and they're going to find it. So that that again is going to be that baseline of users that you're going to get. And speaking of advertising prices, the chart boost here has some interesting data of what you're going to pay to acquire one user, and you're paying $2 to $3, and this is just across the whole bar. If you're looking to target more specifically, you're looking to target, let's say, mid-core players as far as games go, it can get even more expensive. So if you want 1 million users, you're going to have to shell out $3 million to get that, and they're not guaranteed to be retained as well. So when we talk about App Store optimization, really we want to focus on the major players, and iOS and Android are it. Nobody really is running here with a Windows phone. If somebody has a Windows phone here, like, raise your hand, right? We got one person, right? Great. Different countries have a little bit different distribution. Like, Android is not a thing in China, so there are individual app stores there, but really iOS and Google are the two major players, and we want to focus on those. By the way, the slide looks kind of reversed as far as revenue, which is kind of tells you something interesting. So when you talk about search in the App Store, there are a couple little things that you can affect. And one thing that you can affect is the title of your app. And in fact, that has the greatest weight as far as how high you're showing up in search. And showing high in search is really important because if your user has to scroll 7,000 times down, nobody's going to do that. It's kind of similar to web search in terms of the distribution of clicks that you're getting. And the title has the greatest weight. On iOS, you get to put 255 characters worth of words in there. And we constantly see apps take advantage of that. Here's an example of a guitar app. That's how they appear on your iPhone, and that's how they look in the iTunes store. So, they got that a little bit longer title squeezed in there, the ultimate free guitar tab game with tuner songs and tutorials. And, as over the last couple of years, we've seen titles of apps get longer and longer. And because, developers, marketers are realizing that that's essential space that you can put words in to start ranking better. Of course, you want to be tasteful. Some apps do take it a little bit to the extreme. Keywords are another thing. If you're ever logged into iTunes Connect dashboard, you get to select your keywords for your app, and you actually only get 100 characters. And again, that's kind of like that Alta Vista style. If you either are showing up for it or you're not. Neither Apple or Google are doing anything sophisticated as far as like natural language processing and coming up with synonyms. They do a little bit, but you either are ranking for it or you're not. And it's really important to make every character count. Now, when we think about where you're going to show up as far as keywords go, you want the terms that you're ranking for to be the ones relevant to the auto suggestions. And there's a couple of places to look at. You want to look at related search. You want to look at trending searches. You want to look at reviews in the language your users use. As far as that goes. And there's a lot of ways to actually get data on what kind of keywords folks are using and so on and so forth. But how do you make the selection between the different criteria? Well, when we think of what keywords you should rank for, there are really three criteria you want to look at. One is how relevant it is. So let's say you have a fitness app, and the terms like cycling or heart rate or cardio or things like that are going to be super relevant to you, but you wouldn't want to target RPGs or goblins or something like that. It's really important to get the quality of users that are actually looking for your app, and it's a mistake people constantly make. They think, oh, the other numbers look great. Relevancy is really important. And the second thing is difficulty. A lot of the time people might think, oh, let me copy the keywords that Clash of Clans users, they're a great app, and I'll succeed as they will. But really, you're going to be, again, that app that somebody needs to scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll to the 200th place to get to. You want to select terms for which your app can rank for. And depending on how strong you are and what other terms you're ranking for, you have kind of your natural limit. And there's a lot of kind of metrics and software to help you with that as well. And after you take those criterion selections, then you want to think about traffic and how many impressions you're going to get. Because again, a search term that's getting a lot of visibility, but you're on the 20th page, you're not going to get any sort of actual visibility as far as the consumers and the users go. And it's kind of obvious, but all over folks are kind of forgetting that. There are some edge cases as well as far as what you can rank for. For example, we talked about the title and the keywords on iOS, but you can also rank for your publisher name. You can rank for the exact terms in the in-app purchases. Apple does some things as far as ranking for plurals go. And there's some cool stuff that happens as far as indexing different markets and localizations. So here's an example with Crossy Road. They have a couple of different in-app purchases like Epoch and Piggy Bank and all of these things. And actually they're ranking in the top 10 for a lot of those terms. And it's kind of like a little trick that some of these marketing folks do as far as naming their in-app purchases. So it's a little tricky, but cool. Now, Google Play is in some ways more sophisticated, but in some ways simpler as well. Like Apple, they place very heavy emphasis on the title. So, your app's title is gonna give you the heaviest emphasis on what you're gonna be possibly ranking for, but you only get 30 characters worth of space. So it's not that much. Also, your description is actually what's going to be indexed as far as what you're ranking for. There's not an individual keyword field in the developer console for you to enter things into. And the first 80 characters count the heaviest. You get 4,000 characters total. And there are a couple additional characteristics that you want to look at. Here's some examples of tastefully done titles that are a little bit longer. These are all major brands that we're pretty familiar with, and even they on Google Play are naming their app not just CNN, but it's CNN breaking US and world news, Skype, free AM, and video calls. And they're seeing a lot more downloads because they're doing these tasteful kind of brand description changes. Keyword density, like we mentioned before, matters. Here's an example for Candy Crush Saga and how well they rank for Suite. They're #2 when you pull out your phone, and they mentioned it 5 times in their description. You don't want to go too spammy with it, but you also don't, if you're not mentioning it, folks won't find your app on the App Store. And one really cool thing in which Google Play is really sophisticated as far as the App Store goes is their update cycle is really, really fast. Now, on iOS, whenever you want to change any of this metadata, keywords, title, whatever it is, you're going to submit your app and you're going to wait for a week until the folks at Apple, at Cupertino, update your app or reject it, and you have to go through a cycle again. On Google, as soon as you submit your app, it's usually live. The metadata is changed within an hour. So we constantly see companies iterate over their Google Play Store placement on a very fast basis. So as long as you have some sort of technology to see how many new users you're getting day to day, you could make a change. You could even change your title or whatever that you would change, even your icon, right? And you can get the data coming in very quickly. Now, on both of the app stores, localization is key. And here's a quote by the maker of PopCap. They make that zombie game. So they localized their app in China, and they started seeing a lot more downloads. And we constantly see this from our customers and kind of the whole market data. It used to be, 2 or 3 years ago, US was your biggest market, and you're getting the majority of your downloads, majority of your revenue from the United States. Maybe the other English-speaking countries counted for the majority of that. But as smartphone penetration grows in the rest of the countries, we actually start seeing more new users coming from different countries. So here's an example of a huge hit, worldwide, Boom Beach by Supercell. They're actually seeing more downloads for their application in China than the United States. The revenue is still a little bit more distributed, but over time, those users are monetizing fairly well. This is, of course, on iOS and on Google Play. Good luck getting any users in China, unfortunately. Google's kind of banned there. And localization is pretty cool. This is like a super secret slide that I had to fight my whole CSM team to show. Actually, in different countries, you can get indexed for different terms. I see photos going out. Different terms. So for example, in the United States, the localization that you have in Spain, you'll actually show up for because there's a Spanish-speaking population in the United States, and so on and so forth. So you can do a lot of kind of little tweaks and optimizations to get that going. And another thing, timing your app's launch also is kind of important. You're going to get a boost during the first 7 days as far as downloads go, and as far as exposure and kind of where you're ranking relative to where you are until you kind of drop down. So launching on the weekend for most categories is important. We actually did some data science studying on this. And unless you're in business, you want to launch on a weekend. And you typically would expect to see a lot more downloads because of that. And just as a highlight, folks are updating their apps and tweaking with this more and more. There's a couple of examples of folks changing their screenshots, their keywords, their icons, and we kind of see this iterative change going on and on and on. And if you're in charge of the app's placement, take a look at that. Don't be afraid to start testing and start measuring the impact that you're making with this. So we're going to do a Q&A session at the end, but I want to thank you all for coming, and I want to thank the whole SF Agile meetup, Austin, Paul, Nicholas. Thanks for Zendesk for hosting us. And up next is going to be Spiros, who is getting his mic. Oh yeah, quick question, sure.
So there's a bunch of apps that get denied on the Apple Store.
Yeah.
So what do you suggest in terms of, sometimes apps get denied and then what do you suggest in terms of going to Apple directly and finding a new point, or Apple rejects your app, best in terms of diving to fix that in your recent?
Yeah, so there's usually the major reason apps get rejected is they are implementing some SDK that uses things Apple is not happy with, whether it's advertising tracking or APIs inside an iPhone that they're not happy with. Sometimes you can just figure out what they're saying and just submit a new binary very quickly. But if it comes as far as, like the content of the app or the marketing metadata, it might take longer. Now, if you're a bigger company, chances are like both Apple and Google are kind of reaching out to you. We're lucky enough to be here in San Francisco where their BD team is here and we can actually establish relations. And that's how you get featured. That's how you get a lot of that placement. But they're very specific about what they like and what they don't like. And if you show a picture of a gun in your screenshots, you're not gonna get submission approved. So you really want to take a look at what they're saying they're not happy with and act on that quickly. And you also don't want to build like a history of your account getting a rejection, rejection, and a rejection. The Spiros, are you going to introduce him or shall I? Yeah, and here is Sega's. Thanks, folks.
There we go. This is Spiros from Sega, and you lead?
Yeah, I had the user acquisition team for Sega, which means that I spend their money. Hopefully, like I spend it in a smart way. But part of it is doing the ASO. Before I talk about the ASO, I want to address one issue that comes up often when I tell people that I work for Sega, especially at parties. They ask me, do you guys make the consoles? And I'm like, no, we stopped making them like 15 years ago. But what we do make is mobile games. So these are all the studios that we own, and they have made a lot of games. Hardlight makes the Sonic Dash games. We make the Football Manager. That's a very famous game in Europe, my favorite. Total War. My girlfriend almost broke up with me because I was playing it too much. And we have Three Rings and Ignited Artists that we just made a majority investment in. So we have a lot of studios, and we've had some success. We were 2 years ago, we're number 14 in the revenue worldwide. Last year, we're number 13. This year, we're planning to get to number 12. So all right, so the next slide is, so Dom Toretto says that you shouldn't turn your back on your family. And we say we shouldn't turn your back on optimizing. And I want to make this a little bit interactive. So if you have an iPhone, please take it out and go to the App Store, and you can search for Fast and Furious and see what shows up. So if you do that, the first app that will show up is Kabam's game, Fast and Furious, a great game. The second app that shows up is, I don't know, these guys that somehow they got there. But the third app is Crazy Taxi City Rush, which is a Sega game. If you look at it, there's no Fast and Furious in the title. There's no Fast and Furious in the description, and yet we're still there, number 3. If you look at various apps and various very popular apps in the on the store, you'll see that Sega apps rank there. So we've done this with the help of Sensor Tower, obviously, but we'll talk about how we've done it. And we had when we started a year and a half ago, focusing on ASO, we had the same issues, we had the same problems. We want to figure out how should we name the app, what keywords should we use, what's the description, do the reviews and the ratings matter, and what's the thing with PageRank? I had no clue what that thing was a year ago. And the challenge that we had was that Sega is a famous brand, and we get a lot of downloads for Sonic Dash. We've been consistently on the top 300. But on the other side, the IP revenue wasn't at the levels required to run UA in today's marketplace. And this is exactly what my PR team said to say. So as you see, we're on the around we never made it through the 250 top grossing. And if you can't do UA, the only thing you have left is ASO, right? And we did a lot of ASO, and as you see here, we made that jump from top 200 average to top 120 and to top 80 just by every time we had an update and we optimized and optimized, we managed to get consistently on the top 80 of the App Store in the US. And that's like thousands of downloads a day additional just by optimizing, right? Just by doing the right stuff with ASO. And we'll talk about like some numbers that we can talk later, okay? So these are the basic rules, and like bear with me because I think Alex have covered some of them. I just put them there. So obviously it's 100 characters. Don't put any spaces between. Don't put too long keywords, right? My last name is too long. Don't put it there, all right? Don't put any prepositions, a waste of space. The category already counts, right? If you have like adventure or action, it will count, it will rank. You don't need to put action there on your keywords. And I've put the keyword first than the title. The title is more important. It ranks more heavily on the algorithm, but sometimes you have constraints, right? You might care a lot about your brand that you don't want to make the title spammy. Like for Sonic Dash, I cannot change the title. I have to go through, I have to go through 100 Japanese folks to convince them to change the title. So maybe you don't want to like do that, and I don't. So you want to focus on the keywords, right? But if you can't change it, and if you don't care that much, you should try to add the tagline. You should also keep in mind that after like 2 lines, there's 3 dots, and no one will look at it. It cannot be seen, so it's not that bad for your brand, right? The description. I haven't seen an effect on the description. Personally, I would just put anything that would have a message that will get people to download on the first 5 lines. I don't think anything else matters. I have never seen a word on the description change the way that the keyword, that my app ranked on a specific keyword. And like, Sonic Dash gets a lot of downloads, but still, I haven't seen it. So I would just focus on the first 5 words, put your marketing message there, and that's it. Reviews and ratings, I would keep it above 4 stars because I know you get penalized if you are below that. But it's not like you can do much unless you want to get in trouble with Apple, so I wouldn't do that. And Android. So you should use your title, as Alex said, more than you use it on iOS because you don't have the keywords there. The reviews are very important, and keywords that show up on your reviews actually might end up ranking, especially if you have a lot of downloads. So you need to like pay attention on what words people are using when they're describing your app. The description, it matters a lot. My opinion is that long descriptions are bad. Over repeating the keywords is also bad, more than 5 times hurts. The page rank matters a lot, so try to put links of your Google page anywhere you can. I've put a link on one of our Android pages on my email. Whenever I email someone, like there's a link so that I have more and more links. And like I know, like for Sonic Dash, we get so many downloads. Still, I will do it. And then now you can buy your way to the top. You can Google is allowing you to bid on the title on the Google Store. It's a beta, so we'll see how that works out. Okay. So talking about the description, we have noticed that Kayak is onto something because it's amazing. They do get a gazillion downloads, but their description is the smart travel search engine, hotel, flight, and car search and booking, flight tracker, and itinerary management. They have "and" 3 times there, but they rank for every single word that shows up on that description really, really high. And I don't know how they do it, but that's all they have in there. So that's something for you guys to consider and try. So some more rules. Videos are important. We have done testing. If you don't have a good video on your store on iOS and Android, you should do it now. The screenshots are very important. I've changed the fate of a game for a few months just by improving the screenshots on the store. Eventually, the game didn't last that long, but we did make a difference for some time. No one ever scrolls to the last screenshot, by the way, so you shouldn't, the first 3 screenshots are the important ones. No one will scroll up to the 5th one or the 6th one. If you can localize the store, you should do it, but just fully localize it and don't localize it at all, because then you get bad reviews. Social articles and blogs. Well, when I joined Sega, I didn't think they mattered, but I've changed my mind. I actually think they matter a lot, especially for Android. And I think it helps. And if you can do it whenever you're launching, it helps with featuring, it helps with ASO, it helps with building your brand. So you should do it. And if you're a small company, you should hire someone to help you to do it. And it shouldn't be that expensive. The bundle size is also very important. I've had to market a game that was around 600 megabytes. It didn't go well. Oh, I'm really good, but it didn't go well. So yeah, try to keep it below 80 for Android and below 100 for iOS. And then try to do the seasonal updates, like the one that we did now with the Dom Toretto stuff. Okay, so our approach to the ASO, you need the downloads. If you don't have any downloads, if you have 50 and 100 downloads, don't bother with ASO right now. You should bother with making a product that people actually need and use, right? If you need you need to have an ASO solution. We use Sensor Tower. It's shameless promotion of Sensor Tower right here. You need to have a quantitative approach. You need to have one person responsible for ASO. Our guy was supposed to be here, but instead he told me he went for swimming. You need to refresh your store as well. So since that guy went for swimming, I'll walk you guys through it. So you should ranking for a keyword is much more important than traffic. So Alex said that it's relevance, difficulty, and then traffic. For me, it's difficulty is the most important thing. If you don't think, unless you're gonna be on the top 100 free, you won't get a high traffic keyword. Just don't bother. Even Sonic does that. That is consistently for 2 years of the top 200. We cannot get ranked on tough keywords. If you're not ranking for the top 10 results of that keyword, do not bother. You're wasting your characters. Go for an easier keyword. Go for something that's that you can get, okay? And then keep in mind keyword combinations. So maybe you wanna, maybe one keyword is not that good, but if you combine 2 or 3, you get something good. So you should try that. Okay, so this is the formula that we use. I always like putting some math, and it actually looks, okay, it doesn't look that good. Sorry about that. The inputs. So traffic volume score. It's a traffic score that we get from Sensor Tower, and we pray that is accurate. It's a keyword rank difficulty score that we also get from there. The length of the keyword that we are able to count. The download relevance, and that's completely arbitrary. It's what how relevant we think it is. And then what's the chance of the keyword ranking on the top 10? And we have this algorithm that we multiply and divide stuff. And just full disclosure, we have some weightings that I haven't added there. So it's not we weight different inputs differently. So this is an example, right? If it was a basketball-related news app, it was Grantland, right? And I said I want to rank for phone, for the keyword phone. I would never have stood a chance to rank for on the top 10. So the result on my algorithm would be 0, and obviously that means that I'm not going to use it. What if I tried bounce? I have some thought. There's 3,618 apps that are trying to rank on bounce. So it's very low, and the relevance is higher, but it's still very, very low. What about Durant? And it's from Kevin Durant. He's a great player, and actually no one is trying to rank for him. There's 41 apps on iPhone that are trying to rank. So the chance that you will rank on top 10 for him is actually pretty high. And it gets some traffic. It's not getting a lot of traffic, but it gets some traffic. So that's a good keyword to use. And then there's sneakers, who I came up with somehow, and it's in the middle. So it's not. I probably wouldn't use sneakers with this kind of numbers. And this essentially shows the process that we go through. We have like hundreds of keywords for every app that we think is relevant. We have the algorithm on a spreadsheet, and we say, hey, and we update the spreadsheet every time, and we're going to update the app before we choose our keywords, and we change them and update them. So essentially, we iterate, right? We have the bank. We redo the exercise every time the app updates. And I think Austin was asking me on an email, it's like, hey, how often do you guys do this? And honestly, we will do it whenever we get the chance. And unfortunately, marketing is not the department that decides when the product gets updated. It's the product's decision. But whenever they will tell us, we have a process that they have to tell us, and we have to update and refresh the keywords. And that has made the effect that you saw on Sonic Dash. We replace the keywords every time. There's always things changing. We do have seasonal keywords. And we check before and after the update to evaluate the effect. And the way we've tried to evaluate it is we've run a regression. And essentially what we've done is we've identified the key factors that we think affect the number of downloads that we get for a game, right? So what do we think is important? UA and cross-promo obviously is important. The install log or word of mouth, essentially the installs that we got the day before or the 2 days before has an obvious an effect on the amount of installs that you will get today. The featuring is really important, and we do get features sometimes being Sega, so we have to account for that fact. And also weekends and holidays, they have an effect on the amount of downloads. So we run a regression, and this is not the regression actually, it's just like the regression to get a smile. So we ran the regression, and we have found that thanks to the ASO changes that we made on games that had very high number of downloads, like Sonic Dash, right? We had a 15 to 30% lift on organic installs. So that's a 4 to 5 digit number in terms of downloads per day that you get additionally. We found 5 to 15% for titles that were getting some volume, but nothing crazy, like Crazy Taxi, for example. It does rank on racing apps, but it's never on the top 100. We were able to lift it by 10, 15%. And we have had some titles that just never got many downloads, and we did the same thing that we did with Sonic Dash, no effect whatsoever. It was a waste of our time. So that's pretty much it. So that was the presentation. Yeah, please now all go download all our games. It's like what I do. So I think we're open for questions.
We're open for questions. Let's give a round of applause. If you have a question, come over here to me with the mic so that we can get the question for the video.
Great, thank you. So just the last slide here, looking at the lift, 5% on the low end for low volume games, 30% on the high end for higher volume games. How do you see that for non-gaming apps? Is that, 5 to 30%, is that a reasonable range? Is it?
So I've never marketed non-gaming apps. I wouldn't.
I'm sorry, it was more for Alex.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah. We work with a lot of different kind of customers, and sometimes we've even seen the bigger boost in the non-gaming genres. Gaming is really competitive. There's a ton of folks doing UA. The reason UA is really expensive is because the LTV of the top performing apps is really, really high, and they can continue to bid up and pay $10 per user sometimes. When we're working with non-gaming apps, sometimes they're not as savvy a lot of the times. The folks in gaming are really a lot of the time ahead of the curve as far as the marketing techniques and so on and so forth. We've actually seen like some of the bigger lifts on the non-gaming side, productivity, business, e-commerce, social, so on and so forth. Those verticals can get an even bigger boost.
The one thing I can say is that we have found it easier to rank on apps, on keywords that are not really gaming-focused apps than for gaming, because like the gaming guys know and they target well. Well, like if if you take Lyft, for example, we have a game ranking for that keyword and other apps. So it seems like it's easier.
I have two questions. First one's from Sensor Tower. So I have a deep SEO background, and I guess my question is, do you see a difference between, are there more searches like in the short tail? So for example, like I work in apartment rentals, so are there more searches like for apartments versus like in the long tail, apartments for rent, San Francisco apartments, that sort of thing. Like what sort of breakdown do you see there? And I don't know if you have an SEO background at all, but I'm wondering how that's different from traditional SEO.
Yeah, that's a great question. So SEO and ASO are kind of similar in a way. When we started working on ASO, we tried to transfer some of the techniques that we knew from SEO to it. Now, because of the way kind of your device looks like and the kind of search queries you can type in and the kind of just usability and interaction you're going to have, those longer term specific targets like apartments for rent, San Francisco, are not going to show up as often on ASO, but you still kind of have that parallel-esque distribution of game, RPG, action, whatever hit of the week, Flappy Bird is going to get a lot of that traffic, but there's still tons of folks searching for whatever, I don't know, drink mixing app, like recipes for something, and we constantly see that over and over again. They can form a really good baseline of downloads.
And I assume there's no localization like Google does, where, for example, I pull up, my Chrome app and I say apartments for rent, and they geolocate me to San Francisco, and they show me San Francisco apartments for rent pages from, all the different sites. There's nothing like that for the app stores where I type in apartments for rent and they know that I'm in a certain location. They're going to show me stuff that's relevant to that.
So there are some ways actually to geofence your application to a certain location, but very, very few apps are doing that. And funnily enough, you actually started ranking for all these obscure city names because of that. Literally like nobody searches for. But there's not really a way to say like, oh, because I'm local to this market, let me rank higher. Again, the Ask Jeeves Alta Vista slide, the technology is not quite there yet.
And then secondly, thirdly, from Sega. So first of all, that the seasonal keywords tip is gold. Thank you for that. My question is, so when you launch a new app, do you what's your mix between organic and paid, right? You're talking about, if you don't have any downloads going already, you have a brand new app, there's no brand recognition, that sort of thing. I mean, you're Sega, so you have brand recognition. But if you're a brand new app, how do you think about kickstarting those downloads? Because downloads are arguably a big ranking factor, just like reviews and such for App Store optimization. But what's kind of your mix and your magic sauce there?
So it depends on whether we're getting featured or not. So for us, in many cases, if we're getting featured, we're not going to do any UA. We're gonna be ready to do UA if we don't know if we're getting featured or not. So we will be ready to do UA if we're not. And on Thursday, on Friday, when we see what's going on, we'll start it off or not. So for scenario A, we are getting featured, and we have modeled out how much downloads we can expect on its featuring position. Then, depending on that and whether we think it's sufficient or not, we'll pause everything and wait at least a couple of weeks before we start. If we are not getting featured, we will be doing UA, and we'll be very aggressive on the first week. You would expect that more than 50% of your downloads would come from user acquisition, if you can afford it.
Well, so you have a benchmark across your apps. I mean, obviously you've released a ton of different games and such. You kind of have a benchmark to say if we reach this, then we don't have to do it. But if we don't, then we might have to help it along a little bit to get it to where you want it to be.
We benchmark the featuring side, right? So we say, hey, this featuring is going to get us a lot of downloads. We don't need to. So if you're getting featured and you're like a good feature is like you're wasting your money if you're doing UA. So we know what's the cutoff because there's like 50 different types of featuring that you might get. When we, as soon as we see it, then we make a decision. We tend to avoid, if we can avoid a burst, we will avoid it. Like we don't think it's the smartest way to do user acquisition. Yeah. Yeah.
I want to add a little bit of that because we study apps launches all the time and kind of what happens. And like Spiro said, there are different kinds of features. You can be featured as a big banner on the home screen. You could drive 1 million downloads in a day from that if your app hits #1 overall. But the UA bursts are there to really get you to category rank where users have never been exposed to your app are going to see that. It's very rare that initially when you launch an app, like the UA cost you're going to pay during that day is going to justify it as far as the LTV goes. Sometimes takes, especially for a title that you're launching, many months of iteration to get the monetization in place and so on and so forth, or even acquisition to be sure you're getting the great kind of conversion. So the folks that really do the heavy UA are the folks that have got the monetization in place and they do it steadily over time.
I mean, obviously you've done a soft launch and you know what's what's your LTV, what's your CPI cost, how well you convert, all those things, and then you have those things in advance and you have a plan, and you need to have the Vangles and the Charbus and have this everything ready, creative ready, everything ready, and then if you can do it, you can do it. It's better to be in soft launch longer if you can afford UA and if you're not gonna get featured. Yeah.
What is a soft launch?
A soft launch is when you test your application in a smaller geo like Canada or Australia, and you're going to test out, whether, which icons you're going to use, screenshots, and you're going to test out the monetization. So you're going to acquire maybe like 50, 100,000 users, depending on your budget, in a country like that, before you go and launch it in a major worldwide. And we see all the studios that have, the possibility to do that. They'll do Australia, Canada, something in the English-speaking countries, and then they do the worldwide launch. And that's what you constantly see over and over again. And a lot of the top applications that you look at, those developers have titles that they're only available in Canada. In fact, Canadians kind of get lucky that they get to try out all the games first.
Cool. My question, I had 2 questions. One for yourself. You mentioned the edge cases. There was plurals and there was in-app purchases. How do those affect, and what do you mean by plurals?
So some of the time, Apple and Google, if let's say you're targeting door, like you have a door painting app or something, then they'll be able to conjugate door to doors, and you'll rank for that. It doesn't always work, so you want to check for those things. As far as the in-app purchases, it's kind of a rare case. You typically rank pretty lowly in it, but some folks are pretty smart about selecting like a 2-word in-app purchase and they're ranking for those. It's kind of a very niche technique, but it's something that we wanted to bring up as that's another thing that happens.
In-app purchases, say that again?
So each in-app purchase can have a name. Like for example, if you're playing an app and you can buy like 500 gold worth of things, but maybe folks get smart and they'll name it. Instead of buying 500 gold, they'll name it Sapphire Ruby or something like that, or Sapphire Gem or something like that. So the name of the in-app purchase, how it appears inside the App Store, you can get indexed on and rank.
Cool. And I had a question about, you showed the chart where you showed different types of app. Kevin Durant, bunch of people. How did you get all those numbers?
I used them. One of our apps at Sensor Tower, and I just got the numbers that would come up for that app. That was like, I cannot say which app it was, but essentially on Sensor Tower you can get those numbers.
Oh really?
And you can so pretty much use that tool.
Okay, cool, thank you.
So we do a lot of machine learning and things like that to figure out those numbers.
Hi. When you guys talk about limiting the frequency of key terms in a description or a short description, especially on the Play Store, does stemming matter? So you guys just talked about plurals. Does door and doors, do they count in that up to 5 limit that you guys recommend?
So I think this is one of the topics that we looked in when we were doing some of the analysis on that. So the cases we studied where people had STEM terms, nobody hit it like over like 10 where, they had doring, or whatever. So the results were kind of inconclusive. It seemed like Google was pretty good at figuring out what term it is and doing the different conjugations and stemming, but there aren't really apps that are like, oh, you're 5 and you go to 6. It's never like a very direct drop off. It's a very gradual drop off. The more you start mentioning.